And we will begin our focus on the Middle East region, where we observe that the coalition countries, namely the United Arab Emirates, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, Israel, and the United States, are now beginning to confront their initial challenges, serious challenges, and trials. Let's start by saying that the US and Israel are already planning to reduce the intensity of strikes on Iranian territory. And it seems that from the next stage of the military operation, Iran and Israel will focus more on intelligence, because during the first 7 days of strikes, we have seen a great deal of video materials and footage showing the coalition striking simply at empty targets, or at models of aircraft or missile launchers drawn on the asphalt or on the paving slabs. And all these mock-ups, all these staged operations, they divert the attention of the main forces and, of course, compel the coalition to expend more ammunition for their destruction. There's another important point, or more precisely, a specific figure. Today, the Pentagon, or rather, according to the simplest calculations, it appears that the Pentagon is spending approximately $1 billion every single day for the execution of this particular operation, which is an incredibly expensive undertaking. And today, I want to remind you that just the other day, War Minister Hegseth requested an additional $50 billion for the continuation of the military campaign. This tells us that, at a minimum, the United States plans, possibly with such a rapid rate of financial expenditure, to continue fighting and prolonging this conflict for another 50 days. But any amount of money can be allocated for this military operation. However, the production of those very PAC-3 interceptor missiles for Patriot systems, they are not being manufactured at the same pace that the Pentagon is prepared to allocate or receive funds for. The manufacturing of these particular types of missiles is severely restricted, and we can observe that during the initial days of the conflict, states such as the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait use these missiles in an extremely irrational manner, practically without any consideration for their quantity, as if their supply was truly unlimited and endless. On this topic, a very interesting statement and observation was made by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. He stated that in just the initial days of the armed conflict in the Middle East, the nations of the Middle East region had expended approximately 800 PAC-3 type missiles, specifically designed for the Patriot defense system. Also, that's literally within just 6 days of the conflict. Zelensky also added that Ukraine had not possessed such a large number of missiles since the very beginning of the conflict with the Russian Federation. This means that in 4 years, Ukraine received fewer missiles of this specific type than were expended in just 6 days of military operations in the Middle East. And mostly they are being so heavily expended, perhaps due to the rather inexperienced calculations from Qatari, Bahraini, and the United Arab Emirates. While they can be understood, in principle, these images, for example, were published from Qatar. Here we see Qatari air defense forces attempting to shoot down missiles that are flying towards energy infrastructure facilities, military infrastructure, and airfields. And we see that some of the missiles do reach their targets. But the main thing, according to all these video materials, is that sometimes Iran, for example, sends 5 or 6 ballistic missiles towards Bahrain or Qatar, while Qatar and Bahrain might launch up to 15 PAC-3 missiles to intercept those ballistic missiles. So we can see that the consumption rate is not 1-to-1, but sometimes 3-to-1, and sometimes these missiles are even launched completely in vain. And we understand that these Persian Gulf states, of course, have just one goal: to preserve all their infrastructure and prevent its destruction, because it's on this infrastructure that was built, or rather, was built before this conflict began, all the wealth and prosperity of these nations. Now we see that all of this is simply being destroyed. They are trying to shoot down these missiles, and consequently they are used up very, very quickly. But the thing is, for the Persian Gulf states, this is not important. It is not their problem. Today, the Gulf states are already issuing an ultimatum to the Americans, saying that if you don't ensure the security of our states, the Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other such nations, then we will cancel all investments in the U.S. economy and also begin to withdraw previously made investments, which could actually lead to quite substantial problems. However, the issue here is not that the American side is reluctant to provide missiles or is intentionally withholding them, or anything of that nature. It's simply that missile production isn't at a sufficient level to meet the demands of all Persian Gulf states and to intercept all of Iran's missiles, which have been manufactured and stockpiled over the past, perhaps, several decades. But here, of course, it is precisely the United Kingdom that comes to the aid, in the person of Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who has declared that Ukrainian units will be pulled out from the territory of Ukraine, who are involved, or rather were involved, since the conflict began on Ukrainian territory, with the downing of Russian Shahed and Garan drones, and these units are now gradually arriving in the Middle East. One unit has already arrived, another unit is expected shortly, and now they're already trying to find ways to reduce their dependence on PAC-3 missiles and transition to diversified air defense assets, so they don't have to use expensive PAC-3 missiles to shoot down Iranian ballistic missiles, as well as cheap Garan-type drones. However, we must understand that this entire process actually began, in fact, already during the initial stage of the conflict. This suggests that by the time this system is fully implemented, a significant amount of time will certainly pass, and during this period, all the infrastructure of the Persian states, especially the oil-producing one, could be completely destroyed. For example, we can already see that oil prices are breaking records. Already, some individual brands are trading at $90 to $95. Some sources are reporting that the price of oil could rise to as much as $150. But we will return with you to various video materials. And today, footage is being published from the territory of the state of Bahrain. Today, a large amount of video footage is being published from this area, from this small state. And in this footage, we are witnessing direct impacts from Iran's ballistic missiles on oil refining facilities, specifically targeting the largest oil refineries. The strikes are also being delivered against military bases, and we can clearly see that almost nothing is being intercepted anymore by the air defense systems of that particular state. Moreover, today, some sources are already reporting that the air defense systems of this small nation are now completely depleted. Iranian sources, by the way, have repeatedly stated that during the initial stage of combat, all air defense reserves of Middle Eastern states were fully exhausted, communications were destroyed, and the Iranian side hints that the main strikes will only begin later, and it's possible these major strikes could start very soon. Here in these frames, we see fires. We see the consequences of strikes that simply cannot be repelled by this small state called Bahrain. Here are more strikes on the American base. We see the consequences of the strikes. This means that practically everything is already getting through here. And of course, in addition to the problems with air defense and missiles, we must understand that these nations are receiving even basic food and consumer products through maritime supply routes. And some sources are reporting that, for example, in the United Arab Emirates, there's only a 10-day supply of fresh food remaining. This means we must clearly and unequivocally understand that within these 10 days, no one will be able to unblock the Strait of Hormuz. This is simply impossible. 10 days is a very, very short period of time to unblock the Strait of Hormuz. And we can clearly see that the Iranian side, despite various statements, has not lost its statehood and has not lost its self-governance. Western media, by the way, is also reporting on this, that the entire state apparatus is fully controlled. All branches of government are deeply intertwined and connected, which is why 10 days is an extremely short time frame, and we can clearly see that there has been no significant progress here. Another state that is either completely lost or is on the verge of losing its air defense potential is Kuwait. Today, the Americans have completely closed their embassy because they understand that apparently no one here will be able to defend anything anymore. And today, the primary footage is coming in from the area of the U.S. base known as Ali al-Salam, which is situated to the west of Kuwait. Here, a minimum of 20 strikes on the base have been confirmed, and a satellite image showing thermal anomalies is being observed. So, we can see that fires are covering approximately 20% of the base, which is quite a significant amount. And there is some small objective control footage available, which clearly shows us what is currently happening in this area. So Kuwait is already the second Middle Eastern state that has lost any air defense potential.